Welcome back. Many years ago, my very first consulting boss had a saying that has stuck with me decades later. And he said, "Michael, in the absence of data, my opinion's better than your opinion." It stung a little bit then, but it has stood the test of time. And I want to talk about how we can ensure that that dynamic does not play out in the workshops that we facilitate. And the way we can ensure that that doesn't happen is by use of a briefing book. I've mentioned this in several other blogs. Today I want to talk about them in more detail, what they are, what they contain, and why they're so important to use. So the concept of a briefing book actually derives from the military and from public relations. And in both of those situations and in ours, the intention is the same. It's a set of documents that is presented to participants to more fully inform the discussion and the decisions that are going to be made. Now, because it's so situational, the content will vary based on the discussion. For our purposes, a briefing book for a strategic planning session will look very different than a briefing book for a site selection discussion. But for this discussion, let's use the strategic planning example to carry it forward. When I facilitate strategic planning discussions, the kinds of things that I typically like to include in a briefing book include things like this. First, I like to make sure that we have financial information about the organization as a whole and or specific lines of business if the conversation is going to go to that level. I also try to include any competitive information if it's easily accessible. Also, if the client has done a SWOT analysis, and by that I mean an assessment of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, I include that analysis. If not, we often include the raw material for a SWOT analysis so that the participants can actually do it as part of their session. From there, I'll also try to understand what kind of information we can include that is input from key stakeholder groups. By that I mean employee surveys, perhaps member surveys or assessments, maybe even information from key clients or customers if the organization has that information at the ready. It's very important for any briefing book to package it in a way that is usable, readable, and accessible in the moment, because a good briefing book should get a lot of work out during the session. That said, it's very important that that information be distributed well in advance of any workshop that you will facilitate. I strongly suggest to my clients that we package and distribute it at least 2 weeks in advance, with a strong recommendation from the sponsor that every participant read it and annotate it before the meeting with an intention of sharing their thoughts with the room. Usually this is incentive enough for at least a critical mass of the people to have reviewed it beforehand. And so then we can spend a briefer amount of time in the room asking people to share their thoughts or insights from the material, thus giving everybody the benefit of a common foundation of knowledge. So, the next time you are asked to facilitate a high-stakes workshop, consider the importance of a briefing book and spend the time with your client to understand what needs to go in, how it can be packaged, and how it should be distributed to fully inform that discussion. Thank you.